Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to Midnight Affairs Tales. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world you are watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story, Chapter 1. The letter I was never meant to open. The sirens screamed over the battered streets of Austin, Texas. Rain hammered the sidewalks like 1,000 war drums, and the wind howled against the windows of Jason Miller's home. He moved fast, stuffing important papers and a few clothes into duffel bags. The emergency alert kept flashing on the TV screen. Severe tornado warning. Seek immediate shelter. Jason yanked open the closet in the master bedroom, reaching for a box of insurance papers. Instead, a slim, worn envelope tumbled out from behind the top shelf. It was not addressed to him. His heart thudded once against his ribs, hard and heavy. He picked it up. Vanessa's name was scrawled across the front in a handwriting he did not recognize. Jason hesitated, staring at it as the windows rattled around him. The storm outside sounded like a freight train screaming toward the house. His fingers trembled. He knew he should leave it alone. It was probably nothing. Maybe a friend. Maybe her sister. Maybe not. Jason tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of folded paper, and what he read made his vision blur. I cannot wait until you are free. I wish Caleb could call me Dad the way he calls you. You have always been the love of my life, even when you chose him over me. The words clawed at his chest, each sentence a punch to the gut. Jason stood there, breathing hard, feeling the walls tilt around him. Outside, the storm screamed louder, but it was nothing compared to the hurricane inside him. Vanessa's voice floated up the stairs. Jason, are you ready? He shoved the letter deep into his jacket pocket. Was it true? Had everything he built been a lie? Jason forced his face blank and answered, yeah, coming. But inside, something had shattered, and there was no gluing it back together. Would the truth destroy everything, or had it already? Wait, I need to tell you something important. Have you ever realized that you keep watching my videos but haven't subscribed yet? This video has reached this point, which means you're enjoying it. So why not subscribe? I have a big goal, 10,000 subscribers, and you can help me reach it. Think about it. If you don't subscribe now, you might miss my next big video. This is the moment. Hit that subscribe button now. Do it now. And don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss out. I know you'll do it. And when we hit 5,000 subscribers, I have a special surprise for you. Now let's continue story. Jason drove through the pounding rain, his hands locked on the steering wheel, so tightly his knuckles turned white. Vanessa sat beside him, scrolling through her phone, humming softly to herself. Caleb was asleep in the back seat, oblivious to the chaos raging in Jason's chest. Every red light felt like a trap. Every beat of the windshield wipers was a countdown. Vanessa laughed at something she saw on her phone. Jason glanced sideways at her, really looking, seeing not his wife, but a stranger wearing her face. Did you find everything we need? She asked, still smiling, still pretending. Jason nodded. Yeah, everything important. The shelter was 10 miles out. A high school gymnasium turned into a temporary refuge. The radio crackled with static and warnings. Jason barely heard it over the roar in his head. The letter burned against his side like a brand. He could feel its weight through the jacket, a constant, bitter reminder. I wish Caleb could call me Dad. Jason's stomach twisted. He looked in the rearview mirror at his son, his boy, mouth open slightly, snoring softly. Caleb had his nose, his stubborn chin. He had to, right? Vanessa's hand found his on the gear shift, squeezing lightly. Hey, we are okay. It is just a storm. Jason forced a tight smile. Yeah, just a storm. But storms could tear whole houses apart. Storms could strip everything down to the foundation, leaving nothing but wreckage. And Jason was starting to wonder if that was exactly what was about to happen to his life. Chapter 3. The weight of silence. The gymnasium was a blur of cots, crying babies, and exhausted volunteers. Jason set up their spot near the far wall, pretending everything was normal, pretending the ground was not falling out from under his feet. Vanessa wrapped Caleb in a blanket and settled him down. Jason watched her every movement like a hawk. She acted like nothing was wrong, like she was still his wife, the mother of his child. Jason sat stiffly on the edge of the cot, the letter crumpled in his fist inside his jacket pocket. "Are you okay?" Vanessa asked, sitting next to him. Her perfume was too sweet, too familiar, twisting in his gut. Jason nodded once. "Tired." She leaned her head on his shoulder. Jason froze. Her touch felt foreign now, like a spider crawling across his skin. He thought about confronting her, about pulling out the letter right there, under the flickering gym lights, demanding answers. But he did not. Not yet. He needed to be sure. He needed proof. A letter was not enough. Maybe it was old. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe. Jason stared across the crowded gym, eyes unfocused. Somewhere, a baby wailed. A man cursed at his phone. A woman sobbed quietly into her hands. All around him, lives uprooted by a storm. And his, by something much colder. Jason Miller, former Green Beret, decorated soldier, the man who had faced bullets and bombs without flinching, now sat paralyzed by a single piece of paper. He closed his eyes. If there was a truth to find, he would find it. But he already knew, deep down, that once he opened that door, there would be no going back. The morning sun broke through the storm clouds, casting harsh light across the gymnasium floor. Jason shifted on the thin cot, his back aching from a night of half-sleep. Across from him, Caleb stirred, yawning wide and blinking up at the rafters. "Morning, Dad," Caleb mumbled, rubbing his eyes. Jason forced a smile. "Morning, buddy." Caleb's face lit up, the same way it always did. And for a second, Jason's heart clenched. That smile, it was supposed to be a reflection of him. His blood, his legacy. But now, the seed of doubt had been planted, and it spread like a poison. Jason watched as Caleb climbed out of bed, messy-haired and barefoot, chasing after a ball some kids were tossing around. His laughter filled the cavernous gym, pure and innocent. Vanessa joined Jason, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "Looks like he slept well," she said, sitting beside him. Jason took the cup without looking at her. "Yeah, he always does." He stared hard at Caleb, searching for himself in the boy's features. He saw glimpses, the stubbornness, the energy, but were those learned behaviors? Mannerisms copied from years of living together? Jason's mind replayed the words from the letter, over and over, carving grooves into his brain. "I wish Caleb could call me Dad." Vanessa sipped her coffee, oblivious. Or pretending to be. Jason could not tell anymore. The doubt grew heavier with every passing second. Jason squeezed the paper cup so hard it buckled. Vanessa glanced at him. "You are really quiet." Jason forced a laugh that sounded brittle even to his own ears. "Just tired." She smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder again. This time, Jason stiffened so much she pulled away, frowning slightly. Jason said nothing. His mind was elsewhere, already spinning a plan into motion. He needed answers, and he needed them soon. Because if Caleb was not his son, then Jason had been living someone else's lie for nearly a decade. And he was going to burn down every lie, one by one. The VA hospital smelled like antiseptic and hopelessness. Jason stood in line at the reception desk, the crumpled letter burning a hole in his jacket pocket. "Next," the nurse called. Jason stepped forward, his boots heavy against the tile. His file was already in the system, years of deployments, injuries, medals. But today he was not here for treatment. He needed truth. "I want to sign up for the DNA program," Jason said, voice steady. The nurse blinked. "You mean the Ancestry Project?" Jason nodded once. "Yeah, that." She handed him a clipboard. "Standard consent forms. It takes about 4 to 6 weeks for results." Jason took the clipboard, barely seeing the words. He scribbled his signature with a hand that trembled slightly. He turned to leave when the nurse called after him. "Oh, you can add a relative if you want comparative data. Makes the reports more detailed." Jason stopped mid-step. "Relative? Blood relative. He hesitated, then asked, would a son work? Absolutely, the nurse chirped. You would see direct paternal linkage. Jason nodded slowly. Thanks. Outside, the sun was brutal, blinding. Jason climbed into his truck and sat there gripping the steering wheel, sweat rolling down his temples. He could do it. One swab for him. One for Caleb. Easy. Simple. Except it felt like detonating a bomb inside his own life. Jason pulled out his phone, opened the parenting app Vanessa always used to log Caleb's health information. Time for a fun science project, buddy. Jason muttered to himself, his voice bitter. He was not a coward. He had faced men who wanted to kill him and lived. But facing the truth about his own son, that was a whole different battlefield. And Jason Miller was not walking away from this fight. Jason waited 3 weeks. 3 weeks of pretending. 3 weeks of lying to the boy who called him dad, with so much trust it broke Jason's heart anew each time. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning. He almost missed it, buried in a pile of VA correspondence, just another bland, white square among the junk mail. Jason stood in the kitchen, the world narrowing down to the envelope in his hands. He ripped it open. The words slammed into him like a freight train. Probability of paternity, 0%. Jason read it twice, 3 times, the black print swimming in front of his eyes. 0. Nothing. No biological connection. His knees buckled, and he caught himself against the counter. His breath came in ragged gasps, and the kitchen walls seemed to press inward. Vanessa bustled in, carrying laundry. She froze when she saw his face. Jason? What is wrong? Jason shoved the paper into his pocket, straightened up, forced his face into neutrality. Nothing. VA paperwork, he muttered, his voice scraping over gravel. She hesitated, looking like she wanted to pry, but shrugged and kept moving. Jason stood there, heart breaking silently in his chest. Later that night, he watched Caleb sleep, the boy's chest rising and falling in the soft glow of the nightlight. Jason's fists clenched at his sides. He loved this boy. He would always love him. But now he knew. The blood running through Caleb's veins did not come from Jason Miller. It came from a betrayal so deep it made Jason feel like he was drowning. And he was not going to drown quietly. He was going to make them all pay, starting with the woman sleeping peacefully 2 rooms away. The next morning, Jason stared at himself in the cracked bathroom mirror. His reflection looked unfamiliar. Wild eyes, clenched jaw, a man hollowed out by betrayal. Vanessa's laughter floated from downstairs, light and easy, as if the world had not shifted on its axis. Jason splashed cold water on his face, gripping the edge of the sink until his knuckles blanched white. He had spent years surviving deserts, jungles, and battlefields. He had come home to build a peaceful life, a family, a future, and it had all been built on sand. Jason pulled on his jacket, sliding the DNA results into the inside pocket. He needed air. He needed space to think before he did something he would regret. Heading out. Vanessa called as he made for the door. Jason forced a tight smile. Hardware store. That leaky sink in the garage is getting worse. Vanessa waved a hand without looking up from her tablet. Grab some milk too? Jason nodded and stepped outside, the door clicking shut behind him. The cold February air bit into his skin, but it was the fire inside him that truly burned. He climbed into his truck and sat motionless, staring at the steering wheel. He could not just explode. Not yet. Not without a plan. He thought of Caleb upstairs, sleeping peacefully, trusting him completely. Caleb deserved better than a father who acted recklessly. Jason drew a long breath and turned the ignition. No, he would not act like a fool. He would gather every piece of evidence. He would build a wall of truth so strong that when he confronted Vanessa, there would be no lies left for her to hide behind. This was not war. It was something far worse. And Jason Miller was not losing this battle. Jason drove aimlessly, winding through back roads, past ranches and abandoned gas stations, until he ended up in the parking lot of an old diner. He ordered black coffee and sat alone at a corner booth, the world outside a blur beyond the fogged glass. He needed to think like a soldier. Strategy. Timing. No rash moves. First step, surveillance. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through a local tech store's website. GPS trackers, hidden cameras, discreet software. All easy enough to acquire. All legal if you knew how to use them. Jason's thumb hovered over the Order Now button. His heart pounded in his chest, steady and relentless, like the march of boots across open ground. The waitress appeared with his coffee, snapping him back to the present. "You look like you have got the weight of the world on your shoulders, Han," she said kindly, setting the cup down. Jason offered a tired smile. "Something like that." She winked and left him alone. Jason stared into the dark swirl of his coffee. He would play the long game. Watch. Wait. Gather proof. When the time came, he wanted there to be no denials. No gaslighting. No sobbing apologies that made him second-guess his own sanity. Only truth. Jason slid his phone back into his pocket and finished his coffee in 3 burning gulps. By the end of the week, he would know everything. Every whisper. Every lie. And when the time came to strike, he would not miss. 2 days later, Jason installed a small, discreet GPS tracker under the bumper of Vanessa's silver SUV. He worked quickly in the garage under the pretense of fixing the leaking sink, hands steady, mind focused. That night, as Vanessa claimed she was heading to a late meeting with the school board, Jason kissed her cheek goodbye and watched her drive off into the night. He climbed into his truck, phone connected to the tracker app. The blinking dot on the screen moved steadily across the city map. Jason followed at a distance, heart pounding in his ears. Vanessa turned off the main highway and pulled into a dimly lit parking lot behind an old bar on the outskirts of town. Jason killed his headlights and coasted to a stop 2 blocks away. He watched through binoculars as she climbed out of her SUV, adjusting her jacket, checking her hair. Then a man stepped out of the shadows. Tall, leather jacket, confident stride. Jason's stomach twisted into knots. They embraced. Not friendly, not professional. Vanessa's arms lingered around his neck. The man's hand slid down her waist. Jason gripped the steering wheel so hard it creaked under his fingers. The man pulled back just enough for Jason to see his face under the flickering parking lot light. His blood ran cold. It was Tyler, his old army buddy, his best friend. Ball surged up in Jason's throat, and he barely managed to swallow it down. They disappeared into the bar together, laughing, heads close. Jason sat frozen in the dark, heart pounding against his ribs, the final betrayal slicing deep. This was bigger than he had feared. This was war. And Jason Miller was just getting started. Jason sat low in his truck seat, binoculars trained on the bar entrance. His breath fogged the window despite the cold air seeping in through the cracked glass. Inside the bar, neon lights buzzed weakly, painting everything in sickly colors. Jason watched Tyler and Vanessa slip through the front door, arms brushing, heads close enough to share secrets. His chest tightened. Tyler, of all people, the man he had trusted in war zones, the man he had once taken a bullet for. Jason's hands shook with barely contained fury. He forced himself to wait, watching, studying. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, the door creaked open and the 2 emerged, weaving slightly. Vanessa's laughter peeled into the night air, raw and too loud. Tyler pressed her against the wall beside the bar, kissing her like a man who had waited years. Jason's stomach twisted, but he kept watching, every moment carving another scar into his heart. He pulled out his phone, snapping photos silently through the zoom lens. Clear shots. No denying it. Proof. Vanessa's hands tugged at Tyler's jacket. Tyler lifted her onto the hood of his car like they had done it 100 times before. Jason looked away for a second, while rising. He wanted to storm over, wanted to break Tyler's face open right there in that filthy parking lot. But he did not. Not yet. Jason gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles bloodless. He waited until they drove off together into the night. Only then did he let himself breathe, the sound ragged and broken in the silent cab of his truck. Tonight was not the night for confrontation. Tonight was for gathering ammunition. Because when Jason fired back, he was going to make sure nobody survived the blast. Jason spent the next morning hunched over his laptop at the kitchen table, Vanessa bustling around behind him, humming a cheerful tune. He transferred the photos from his phone, each image a blade twisting deeper. Vanessa, Tyler, arms entwined, mouths locked, desperation etched into their bodies. Jason labeled each file carefully. Date, time, location, evidence. Across the kitchen, Caleb worked on his homework, tongue sticking out in concentration as he scribbled answers into a worksheet. Jason's chest ached as he watched the boy. He had always believed that protecting his family meant shielding them from the world. Now he realized the danger had been inside his home all along. Vanessa leaned over his shoulder, startling him. "Working on your book again?" she teased, peeking at the laptop screen. Jason snapped it shut instantly, masking his reaction with a tight smile. "Just sorting old pictures," he said smoothly. She laughed and moved away, stirring a pot on the stove. Jason watched her out of the corner of his eye, noting every movement, every casual lie she lived with so easily. He wanted to hate her. God, he tried. But part of him still loved the woman he thought he had married. The woman she had pretended to be. Jason turned back to the laptop when she was not looking. He saved the files onto an encrypted flash drive, hiding it in a hollowed-out book in the study. Insurance. He was not going to move until he had everything. Every secret. Every betrayal. Jason Miller was not the type to fire warning shots. When he pulled the trigger, it would be final. The following Thursday, Jason sat in his truck, the engine idling, watching from a distance. Vanessa was supposed to be attending a funeral for a colleague's father. She had even worn black, her makeup smeared artfully to suggest tears. Jason had kissed her goodbye at the door, watching her walk away with a hollow smile. He followed at a distance, heart pounding a slow, furious rhythm. Vanessa drove past the funeral home without stopping. She did not even glance at it. Jason tailed her carefully through back streets and winding residential areas, tension coiling tighter with every turn. She pulled into the same bar parking lot as before, and there he was, Tyler, waiting, leaning casually against his car like a man without a single regret. Vanessa practically ran into his arms. Jason's grip on the steering wheel tightened until his fingers hurt. He watched as they disappeared inside together once again. The funeral had been a lie, just like everything else. Jason sat there for a long time, the dashboard clock ticking louder than the roaring in his ears. He could almost hear Vanessa's voice echoing in his head, soft and sweet. "You can trust me, Jason." Lies. All of it. He started the truck and drove away into the night, not because he could not bear to watch anymore, but because now he had seen enough. It was time to start planning their downfall, and when it came, it would be merciless. Jason spent the next morning piecing through old memories like a detective at a crime scene. He pulled out old photo albums, dusty shoeboxes of army memorabilia, anything that might connect the dots he had ignored for years. The pieces fell into place with sickening ease. The long weekends Vanessa insisted Jason take 4 guys fishing trips with Tyler. The strange glances between them at barbecues. The way Tyler always had some excuse to drop by when Jason was deployed. Jason's hands trembled as he flipped through an old photo. Tyler grinning beside Vanessa at Caleb's 2nd birthday party, one arm slung too familiarly around her waist. Had it started back then? Had it ever really ended? A knock at the door startled him. Vanessa poked her head in. "Hey, you seen my car keys?" Jason kept his face neutral. "Check the kitchen counter." She smiled brightly, oblivious, and disappeared down the hall. Jason stared after her, hatred boiling just beneath his skin. This was not just betrayal. It was a war they had waged against him, right under his nose. And they thought he was too blind, too loyal to ever notice. Jason rose from the floor, heart pounding with cold purpose. He was done questioning. Done doubting. Now he would find proof so devastating. Even Tyler and Vanessa would not see it coming. And when he hit back, he would hit hard enough to crush them both. Jason's mind reeled back through years of conversations, jokes, and moments he had laughed off. He remembered Tyler, slapping him on the back one drunken night, grinning like the devil. "You are too good for her, man. You ever wonder if she would even stick around if you were not such a badass?" Jason had laughed then, chalked it up to booze and bravado. He remembered Vanessa, teasing Tyler during poker nights. "Maybe I should have married you instead, huh?" she had joked, throwing a wink across the table. Jason had chuckled with everyone else, never thinking twice. Now, in the sharp, brutal light of truth, those moments were knives twisting in his gut. None of it had been innocent. None of it had been harmless. They had been laughing at him, mocking his loyalty, his trust. Jason sat back in the dusty armchair in his study, the air thick with the stench of betrayal and old furniture. He pulled out the encrypted flash drive again, running his thumb over the smooth plastic. It was not enough. He needed more. Something irrefutable. Something public. Jason opened his laptop and began searching. Hotel records. Credit card receipts. Anything Tyler might have left behind in his arrogance. He was not just going to expose them. He was going to rip their carefully crafted lives apart, piece by bloody piece. Because jokes were over, and the punchline was coming for them. 3 days later, Jason sat in his truck across from the small, unmarked clinic on the edge of town. Inside, a single swab of DNA from Tyler was being tested against the sample Jason had secretly collected from Caleb's toothbrush. It had cost Jason a favor he would rather not have called in. But loyalty among old soldiers ran deep when it came to justice. His phone buzzed. New email. Test results. Jason's thumb hovered over the screen, heart hammering. He opened the file. Probability of paternity, 99.98%. The world tilted. Jason gripped the dashboard, breathing through the rage and heartbreak that thundered through him. It was true. Caleb was Tyler's son. The bloodlines were not tangled. They were a clean, brutal switch. Tyler had not just betrayed Jason. He had stolen from him. A family. A life. Jason stared blankly out at the rain-slick streets. There would be no confrontation. No screaming matches. No second chances. This betrayal went beyond forgiveness. Jason Miller was a soldier. A strategist. A man who understood one universal truth. When you are betrayed this deeply, you do not fight fair. You destroy. Completely. And Jason was ready to bring the war to their doorstep. Jason stood in the dim light of his study, the DNA results still clutched in his hand like a death warrant. He moved slowly to the locked file cabinet in the corner, pulling out Caleb's birth certificate. At first glance, everything seemed normal. His name, Vanessa's, a signature line bearing Jason's scrawl. But as he studied it closer, anger burned in his gut. The signature was not his. It was close enough to pass under casual inspection. But he knew his own handwriting better than anyone. Vanessa had forged it. Jason pressed the document flat against the desk, breathing heavily. His whole life had been rewritten with a lie, right down to the legal documents that declared him a father. His mind raced back to the hospital the night Caleb was born. The chaos, the papers thrust into his hands while he hovered over Vanessa, half crazed with exhaustion and emotion. Had she taken advantage of that moment? Had she known even then? Jason's hands curled into fists, the paper crumpling under his grip. She had stolen his choice, his trust, his entire future. Jason placed the birth certificate into a manila folder, along with the DNA tests and the photographs. Evidence, proof, ammunition. He was not going to scream or threaten. When the time came, he would present the truth like a blade across their throats. And he would do it publicly. No mercy, no compromise. Jason Miller was not going to just take back his life. He was going to make sure they lost everything they had ever lied to build. The house felt different now. Every room Jason walked into seemed colder, more alien. The walls that had once held family portraits now felt like silent witnesses to betrayal. In the living room, Jason stood before the fireplace where Christmas stockings had hung every year. Caleb's tiny handprint ornaments. Family photos smiling back at him from the mantel. Lies. All lies. The anger built until it became a physical thing in his chest, clawing to get out. Jason grabbed a framed photo of their wedding day, Vanessa in white, beaming up at him, the very picture of innocence. He hurled it across the room. Glass shattered, spraying across the hardwood floor like frozen raindrops. He grabbed another frame. And another. Pictures, memories, fake milestones smashed one after the other. His breath came in heaving gasps as he ripped through the living room like a storm, tearing down the past with his bare hands. The noise brought Caleb running down the stairs, barefoot, eyes wide with fear. "Dad? What happened?" Jason froze, chest heaving, broken frames scattered at his feet. He forced himself to calm, to smile, to kneel and open his arms. "Just cleaning up, buddy," he said, his voice thick. "Some things got old. Time for new memories." Caleb blinked, uncertain, then ran into his arms. Jason held him tightly, pressing his face into Caleb's hair. The boy smelled like shampoo and crayons. Like innocence. Jason closed his eyes against the burn of tears. Caleb was not to blame. He was just a boy caught in the crossfire of other people's lies. Jason kissed the top of his head, swearing silently to protect him, no matter what it cost. The battle lines were drawn, and Jason was ready for war. Jason sat across from the desk of Mitchell Crane, a sharp-eyed divorce attorney with a reputation for ruthlessness. Crane tapped a pen against a thick folder of documents Jason had brought: DNA tests, forged birth certificates, photographs. "You have got enough here to blow her world apart," Crane said, flipping through the evidence. "And from the looks of it, she will not see it coming." Jason leaned back in his chair, arms crossed tightly over his chest. "I do not want money," he said coldly. "I do not want revenge through courts." Crane raised an eyebrow. "Then what do you want?" Jason's voice was steady, lethal. "I want her reputation ruined. I want her exposed in front of every person she cares about. Family, friends, everyone. I want her to feel what it is like to have everything she lied to protect torn away from her." Crane nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You are not looking for a settlement," he said. "You are looking for total annihilation." Jason met his gaze without flinching. "Exactly." Crane tapped his pen once more. "Then we do it smart," he said. "No messy confrontations. No early warnings. We gather. We wait. We strike once. Hard in public." Jason's mouth tightened into a grim smile. The plan was already forming in his mind. A party. An audience. A perfect, inescapable stage. Where Vanessa and Tyler would be unmasked. Where there would be no hiding. No twisting the truth. Only the cold, brutal exposure of their lies. Jason rose from his chair, heart pounding with grim anticipation. The time for gathering evidence was over. The time for revenge was almost here. Jason's living room was a battlefield now. Papers, photos, flash drives, carefully labeled envelopes. A web of evidence, tight enough that even the slickest liar could not wriggle free. He stared at it all, feeling the cold focus of a man preparing for his final strike. He needed a setting, a perfect stage, one where Vanessa would be surrounded by everyone she cared about, one where the mask could rip off in full view. Jason picked up his phone and dialed. "Hey, Mom," he said when she answered. "Vanessa and I were thinking, maybe a big party for our anniversary this year. 15 years. Pretty big milestone." His mother's delighted voice bubbled through the line. "Oh, Jason, that would be wonderful." Jason smiled grimly. "Yeah, we are thinking something nice. Classy. Maybe a country club rental. Family, friends, everyone we have not seen in a while." "Absolutely," she said. "I will help spread the word." "Perfect." Jason hung up and sat back, letting the plan unfurl in his mind. Vanessa would be glowing. She would be basking in attention. Tyler would be there too, cocky and confident. And when the time was right, Jason would drop the hammer. Not just private exposure, total social annihilation. He stared at the ceiling, breathing slow and deep. Revenge was not a race. It was a masterpiece, and he was almost ready to paint it. Jason worked with brutal efficiency. He booked the biggest banquet hall in the nicest country club in Austin. White tablecloths, crystal glasses, a live jazz band. He sent out invitations designed to look heartfelt and romantic, printed on heavy cream cardstock. 15 years of love, laughter, and family. Join us to celebrate. He smiled bitterly every time he dropped one in the mailbox. The irony was almost too perfect. Vanessa, oblivious, threw herself into preparations. She picked out a new dress. She ordered a custom cake with gold frosting. She practiced her speech about the strength of family in front of the mirror, while Jason watched from the doorway, unseen. Every move she made played right into his hands. Caleb buzzed with excitement too, working on a handmade card for the occasion. Jason's heart twisted every time he saw the boy's hopeful face. This was not Caleb's fault. None of it was. Jason tucked those emotions deep inside, locked them away. He would deal with the fallout later. First, the execution. On the night of the party, Jason stood in front of the full-length mirror in a black suit and tie. He barely recognized the man staring back. Hard eyes, steel in his spine. A man who had nothing left to lose. He tucked the flash drive loaded with evidence into his jacket pocket. Tonight was not about reconciliation. Tonight was about reckoning. And by the end of the night, no one would ever look at Vanessa the same way again. The banquet hall gleamed under chandeliers, every detail screaming wealth and taste. Jason moved through the crowd, shaking hands, smiling, accepting congratulations. Vanessa floated beside him, radiant in a shimmering gold dress, laughing and hugging guests. Jason's stomach churned, but his face never cracked. He spotted familiar faces everywhere, friends from college, neighbors, coworkers, family members. And near the bar, Tyler, laughing, drink in hand, smug as ever. Jason's jaw tightened, but he kept moving. At precisely 8 o'clock, Jason took the microphone. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he said, voice smooth as silk. "It means the world to Vanessa and me to have all of you here." Polite applause filled the room. Jason smiled, glancing at Vanessa. She beamed at him, eyes shining. "Before we move on to dinner," Jason continued, "I thought it would be fun to share a little highlight reel of our journey together." He gestured toward the massive projection screen on the wall. The lights dimmed. A video began to play. Happy photos at first. Their wedding. Caleb as a baby. Family vacations. The crowd cooed and smiled. Then, the images shifted. Surveillance photos. Vanessa and Tyler, holding hands, kissing, laughing in dark parking lots. Gasps rippled through the hall. Jason spoke over the rising murmurs. And for those wondering, yes, the DNA test confirmed that Caleb is not biologically mine. The silence was deafening. Vanessa stumbled back, her face draining of color. Tyler cursed under his breath, shoving his drink onto the bar. Jason's voice stayed calm, measured. "Happy anniversary, sweetheart," he said, locking eyes with her across the room. The truth was out. The bomb had detonated. And Jason Miller stood in the rubble, finally free. The hall fell into stunned silence. Jason stood by the microphone, feeling the weight of 100 eyes pressing down on him. Every breath, every heartbeat seemed louder than the jazz band that had long since stopped playing. Vanessa stood frozen at their table, her hands trembling, the wine glass she had been holding slipping through her fingers and shattering on the floor. Tyler pushed through the crowd toward the exit, muttering curses, but no one moved to stop him. They only stared, at Jason, at Vanessa, at the wreckage of an image that could never be rebuilt. Jason let the silence stretch a little longer, letting the betrayal hang in the air like smoke. "I gave 15 years, Jason said, voice steady, clear. 15 years of loyalty, sacrifice, and love. All for a lie. The words cut sharper than any scream could have. Vanessa finally found her voice, her eyes wide and desperate. Jason, please. We can explain. There is nothing to explain. Jason interrupted coldly. Everyone here deserves to know who you really are. He let his gaze sweep the room, making eye contact with family, friends, Caleb's teachers, Vanessa's colleagues. You lied, he said. You betrayed. And you forged my name to trap me into raising a child who was never mine. Vanessa's knees buckled. She dropped into a chair, head buried in her hands. Jason stood tall. He had thought he would feel triumphant, victorious. Instead, he felt hollow. Because even winning a war like this meant you still lost something along the way. And deep down, Jason knew the final blow was still coming. He just did not know yet who it would hit hardest. The party ended in chaos. Guests whispered and shuffled toward the exits, throwing pitying glances at Jason, furious ones at Vanessa. Jason watched from a distance as Vanessa's carefully crafted world crumbled around her. Her sister refused to speak to her. Caleb's soccer coach turned away in disgust. Even her own parents left without a word. Jason moved to leave too, needing clean air and distance, when he felt a hand grip his arm. Tyler, red-faced, breathing hard, fists clenched at his sides. You think this is over? Tyler spat, his voice low and dangerous. You think humiliating us fixes anything? Jason stared at him, unblinking. It was never about fixing. It was about truth. Tyler sneered. You are a fool. You think she will not twist this back around? Women like her, they survive anything. Jason stepped closer, so close he could smell the alcohol and desperation rolling off Tyler. Maybe, Jason said quietly. But not this time. Tyler shoved him hard in the chest, but Jason barely moved. Security stepped in quickly, dragging Tyler toward the doors. Jason turned to find Vanessa gone. Panic flickered through him. He pushed outside into the chilly night, scanning the parking lot. Her car was missing. Jason's chest tightened. She was not the type to run. Unless she had something planned. He raced to his own truck, pulling open the GPS tracking app he had hidden on Vanessa's phone weeks ago. The blinking dot was moving fast, headed west, out of town. Jason gritted his teeth. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And if he did not move now, he might not get another chance to stop it. The tires screamed against the asphalt as Jason tore down the back roads, headlights slicing through the heavy mist. The tracker showed Vanessa's location slowing near an abandoned house on the edge of town, a place Jason knew all too well. They had looked at it once, years ago, dreaming about renovations they would never make. Now it loomed ahead, silent and broken, like the ruins of everything they had pretended to build. Jason killed the engine a block away and approached on foot, every step silent, measured. The front door was ajar, creaking in the wind. Jason pushed it open, heart pounding. Inside, moonlight spilled across cracked tile floors and peeling wallpaper. Dust choked the air. Vanessa stood in the middle of the room, clutching a small suitcase. Her eyes, when they met his, were wild, desperate. You destroyed everything, she hissed. Jason stepped forward slowly. I only revealed the truth. You destroyed it yourself. She shook her head violently. You do not understand. Tyler, he is not the one you should be worried about. Jason froze. What are you talking about? Vanessa laughed, a broken, hollow sound. You think this was just an affair? She spat. You think Tyler was the end of it? Jason's stomach twisted. You do not know half of it, Jason, she whispered. There are things you cannot bury by showing a few photos. Jason stepped back, cold creeping up his spine, because in that moment he realized the betrayal ran even deeper than he had imagined, and the war he had started was only just beginning. Jason barely processed Vanessa's words before tires screeched outside. Headlights flooded through the broken windows. Another car pulled up fast. Tyler. Jason moved to shield Vanessa instinctively, but she shoved him aside, eyes wild. Stay out of this, she snapped. Jason squared his shoulders, stepping between her and the door just as Tyler burst inside. Fists clenched, face red with fury. "You stupid bitch," Tyler shouted. "You said you had it under control." Jason's mind spun. Had they planned something together? Was Vanessa lying even now? What the hell is going on? Jason demanded. Tyler pointed a shaking finger at Vanessa. "She told me you were suspicious. Said we needed to leave town, start over." But she was buying time, trying to cover her ass. Jason shifted his weight subtly, ready for a fight if it came. Vanessa's lip curled into a snarl. "You were sloppy. You were supposed to be careful." Jason watched the scene unfold, a sick realization blooming in his gut. This had never been just a casual affair. This was a conspiracy, calculated, manipulative, and he had been their pawn for years. "Enough," Jason barked. "Both of you. You lied. You used me, and now you are trying to destroy each other to stay afloat." Tyler sneered. "You think you are some kind of hero? You are nothing, Jason. Always were." Jason smiled grimly. "Maybe," he said, "but tonight, you both lose." The tension crackled like a live wire in the broken house. And Jason knew the final reckoning was coming faster than any of them realized. Jason's mind raced as he drove away from the ruined house, the flash drive heavy in his pocket, the weight of new knowledge pressing against his chest. Vanessa and Tyler were desperate. Cornered rats always bit back. He had to act before they did. He called Mitchell Crane, his lawyer, from the truck. "We move up the timeline," Jason said. "Now." Crane did not ask questions. Understood. Jason's plan was simple but brutal. Get Vanessa to confess. On record. No tricks. No legal wriggling free. He arrived home before Vanessa. He set up the audio recorder under the couch, testing it twice before sitting down with a whiskey glass shaking in his hand. 30 minutes later, the front door creaked open. Vanessa stepped in, pale, makeup streaked, her body trembling with barely contained rage. Jason looked up, keeping his expression hollow. "You wanted to talk?" he said. She dropped her purse with a heavy thud. "You ruined everything," she hissed. "You embarrassed me in front of my family, my friends." Jason leaned back, voice calm. "I told the truth." Vanessa paced like a caged animal. "You want truth," she spat. "Fine. Caleb is not yours. He never was. Tyler and I. It started before you even left for Afghanistan." Jason's heart squeezed painfully, but he kept his face blank. She kept ranting, venom spilling out unchecked. "I forged your signature because you would have never stayed otherwise," she said, voice cracking. "You would have left me." Jason nodded slowly. "And you kept it going all these years?" he asked softly. Her shoulders sagged. "I had to. Caleb needed a father. And you were convenient." The words hit like bullets, but Jason stayed steady. The recorder under the couch blinked silently. Proof. In her own words. Jason smiled coldly to himself. The final nail in her coffin was hammered in place. 2 days later, Jason sat at the center of a polished oak conference table, divorce papers spread out before him like a map of battle. Vanessa sat across from him, flanked by a red-faced lawyer who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. Jason's lawyer, Crane, leaned forward, tapping a thick folder. "We have sufficient evidence to destroy your client in open court," Crane said smoothly. "Perjury, forgery, fraud, paternity fraud." Vanessa's lawyer sputtered, flipping through the folder. "Photos, DNA tests, forged birth certificate copies. And now, a full-tape confession." Vanessa shrank into her chair, her face a mask of humiliation. Jason's heart twisted again, not with love, not with regret, but with cold finality. He had loved a woman who never existed, and now he was burying her. Crane slid the settlement offer across the table. Simple, brutal. Vanessa would walk away with nothing. No house, no alimony. Limited visitation rights with Caleb, supervised. Her lawyer paled as he read it. "If you decline," Crane said, voice polite as a razor blade, "we will go to court and make sure every ugly truth comes out publicly." Vanessa's hands trembled. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Jason leaned forward, his voice low and deadly calm. You wanted to play games. You wanted to gamble with my life. Now you get to lose everything. The room was silent except for the scratching of a pen as Vanessa, defeated, signed the papers. Jason stood without a word and walked out of the conference room into the blinding sunlight. It was done. The war was over. And Jason Miller was still standing. The country club hall shimmered with candlelight and the murmur of 100 conversations, but the air crackled with tension. Jason stood off to the side, dressed sharply, a small remote hidden in his palm. The projector screen dominated the front of the hall, waiting, patient, hungry. Caleb sat at the kids' table, nervously picking at his dinner roll, sensing the strange atmosphere without understanding it fully. Jason's heart ached for him. This was not the boy's fault. It never had been. He turned his gaze to Vanessa across the room. She smiled too widely at their guests, her hands fluttering over her dress, tugging at the hem, adjusting jewelry that did not need adjusting. She knew something was wrong. She just did not know how wrong. Jason checked his watch. Showtime. He walked calmly to the microphone and tapped it once. The room quieted. I want to thank you all for coming tonight, Jason said, his voice carrying clear and strong. It means a lot to see friends, family, everyone who has been a part of our story. Polite applause. Jason smiled. Cool. Controlled. But stories, he continued, are only as strong as the truth behind them. He pressed the remote. The projector flickered to life. At first, the images were sweet. Jason and Vanessa's wedding, Caleb's birth, family vacations. A warm hum filled the room. Then, without warning, the images shifted. Grainy photos. Vanessa and Tyler, kissing, holding hands in dark alleys, slipping into hotels. The hum turned to gasps. Whispers. Chairs scraping back. Vanessa staggered forward. Jason, stop. But he did not. He let the evidence roll out, silent and brutal. One frame after another. No denials. No excuses. No hiding. Truth, projected 20 feet tall for the world to see. And Jason felt nothing but cold satisfaction. The silence after the final photo was deafening. Jason stood still, letting the devastation settle over the room like ash after a fire. Vanessa turned, frantic, to the crowd. It was a mistake, she cried. It was a one-time thing. Someone from the back shouted. Then why so many photos? Another voice, colder. And the DNA test? Vanessa stumbled, words dying in her throat. Jason stepped back from the microphone, watching impassively as her carefully constructed life disintegrated. Her sister stormed out first, dragging her husband with her. Neighbors whispered furiously. Co-workers averted their eyes. Old friends turned away, faces tight with disgust. Even Caleb's teacher looked stricken, as if seeing Vanessa for the first time. Vanessa dropped to her knees on the dance floor, tears streaking her expensive makeup. Jason moved toward Caleb, kneeling to his level. You okay, buddy? He asked gently. Caleb nodded, though confusion clouded his young face. Jason ruffled his hair and stood. He looked around once more, at the broken woman on the floor, at Tyler slipping out the back like a coward, at the guests still frozen in place. Jason took a deep breath. It was never about revenge, he said quietly. It was about the truth. He turned, took Caleb's hand, and walked out of the hall into the crisp night air, never once looking back. Because some stories are better left in ruins. The ride home was silent except for the hum of the tires on asphalt. Jason glanced in the rearview mirror at Caleb, who stared out the window, clutching the homemade card he had made for their celebration. Jason's chest tightened. When they reached the house, Jason parked the truck and turned in his seat. Caleb, he said softly, I need to tell you something important. The boy nodded solemnly. Jason swallowed hard. You know I will always love you, right? No matter what. Caleb nodded again, blinking fast. Jason reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a second folder, a simpler one. Inside, a choice. I want you to know the truth, Jason said carefully. But no matter what, you get to choose who your family is. Blood does not decide it. Love does. He handed Caleb the folder. Inside were two things: a simple drawing Caleb had made years ago of Jason holding his hand, and the DNA test results. Jason waited, heart pounding. Caleb looked at both, then up at Jason. "You are my dad," he said simply. Jason felt the air leave his lungs in a shuddering exhale. Tears burned behind his eyes, but he forced a smile. "Yeah, buddy," he whispered. "I am." They climbed out of the truck together, stepping into the darkened house, leaving the ghosts and ruins of betrayal outside. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Because sometimes, family is the one you fight for, not the one you are given. Jason stood outside the house, the door closing behind Caleb with a quiet snick. The night air was cold against his skin, sharp with the scent of rain and distant fires from nearby fields. A storm was coming again, but Jason welcomed it. He pulled his jacket tighter and stared up at the sky, the stars blurred by the thickening clouds. The party, the confrontation, the fallout. It all felt like a lifetime ago, though only hours had passed. He thought he would feel victorious. He thought he would feel free. Instead, he just felt empty. His truck was parked at the curb. The same truck he had driven to doctor's appointments, soccer games, anniversary dinners. Jason walked to it slowly, every step heavier than the last. He opened the door and sat inside, resting his head back against the seat. Across the street, neighbors peered through curtains. Whispers would spread. The betrayal, the scandal, the ugly truth. None of it could be hidden anymore. Jason closed his eyes. This was what closure looked like. Not fireworks, not triumph, just silence, and the long, slow rebuild of a man broken and reforged. Jason turned the key in the ignition, letting the engine rumble to life. He was not running. He was moving forward. And there was a difference. The news hit faster than Jason had even hoped. By noon the next day, Tyler's wife had filed for divorce, publicly, loudly, and with her own arsenal of evidence gathered over the years. The story spread through the town like wildfire. Whispers in office hallways, muted conversations at coffee shops. Tyler, once a well-liked real estate broker, found his business clients canceling deals without explanation. Jason heard the details and fragments. Tyler's brokerage license under review. His personal bank account frozen pending a lawsuit. Even his social media flooded with brutal comments and laughing emojis. Jason sat at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee, reading the online news with a quiet, detached satisfaction. It was not just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Tyler had built his success on lies and manipulation, on charm and deception. And now, it was all crumbling around him. Jason closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair, letting the victory settle into his bones. He had not thrown a punch. He had not raised his voice. He had simply told the truth. And the truth, when unleashed properly, was far more destructive than any weapon Jason had ever carried. That night, Jason found himself alone in the living room, the walls bare, the shelves stripped clean. He had packed away the family photos, the wedding albums, the relics of a life that no longer existed. Caleb slept upstairs, his breathing steady and safe. Jason had stayed long enough by his bedside to ensure that his son, his real son, blood or not, knew he was loved beyond any DNA test. Now, with the house silent and empty, the price of victory settled heavily on Jason's shoulders. He had won. He had exposed them, shattered their lies, taken back his life. But it had cost him something too. Trust, faith, the innocent belief that love could not be twisted into a weapon. Jason leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, staring into the cold hearth of the fireplace. There were no roaring flames tonight, only ashes. And in a way, that felt right. He would rebuild. He would heal. But first, he would sit with the ruins for a while, to remember, to mourn, to promise himself that he would never again mistake loyalty for blindness. A week later, Jason sat at his desk, a blank notebook open in front of him. He had spent days thinking, pacing, starting and stopping. Now, finally, he was ready. He picked up his pen and wrote the first line. Dear Caleb. The words flowed out slowly, carefully, full of raw, unfiltered truth. I want you to know that being your father has been the greatest honor of my life. You are not my son because of blood. You are my son because of every moment we shared. Every night I tucked you in. Every soccer game I cheered for. Every hug. Every tear. Every smile. Jason paused, blinking hard against the sting behind his eyes. You will hear stories. You will see people whisper. Ignore them. You are not defined by other people's mistakes. You are strong. You are kind. You are mine. He wrote late into the night, pouring every truth, every hope, every hard-won piece of wisdom onto the pages. Not because Caleb needed answers right now, but because one day he would. And when that day came, Jason wanted his son to have something real to hold on to, something no lie could ever erase. The courtroom smelled of old wood and tension. Jason sat at the plaintiff's table, calm and composed, while Vanessa sat across from him, her once golden hair pulled back tight, her face hollow and desperate. Their lawyers exchanged papers, pleasantries masked with razor-edged words. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, called the hearing to order. Jason listened without reacting as Vanessa's lawyer tried to paint her as a misunderstood mother who had made mistakes under emotional duress. Crane, Jason's lawyer, countered with brutal precision. Your Honor, this is not about mistakes. It is about a calculated, decade-long fraud involving forged documents, betrayal, and intentional deception. He laid out the timeline, presented the DNA results, played a short clip from Vanessa's confession recording. Vanessa's face crumpled visibly. Tears slid down her cheeks, but Jason felt no pity. The judge frowned deeply, flipping through the files. In light of the overwhelming evidence, she said finally, custody will be awarded solely to Mr. Miller. Supervised visitation may be revisited after 1 year, pending psychological evaluations. Vanessa sobbed openly. Jason stood, heart pounding, but his face was made of stone. He had not fought to destroy her for fun. He had fought for Caleb. And now he had won. Without theatrics. Without hatred. Just truth. And justice. Jason packed the last box into the truck bed and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The house, his house, stood empty behind him. A hollow shell filled with echoes of memories both sweet and poisoned. He had bought a smaller place across town. Nothing fancy, just clean, new walls and no ghosts. Caleb sat on the tailgate, swinging his legs. You sure you are ready for this, Dad? He asked, his voice too wise for his age. Jason smiled, ruffling his hair. Ready as I will ever be, he said. New house, new start. Caleb grinned, flashing a missing front tooth. They drove through town with the windows down, letting the wind whip through the truck. At a red light, Jason glanced at Caleb, who was looking out at the world with wide, hopeful eyes. The past was heavy, but the future was unwritten. And Jason Miller was finally holding the pen. Weeks passed. Jason heard whispers through the grapevine. Vanessa had moved into a rundown apartment complex on the edge of town, a far cry from the picture-perfect home she once ruled. She lost her teaching job. Her family distanced themselves quietly. Friends stopped answering her calls. Jason drove by once, late at night, curiosity gnawing at him. He saw her sitting on the cracked steps outside her building, cigarette in hand, hair limp and unwashed, staring blankly at the dark sky. He felt no glee, no satisfaction, just a cold, sad finality. She had made her choices, and now she was living with them. Jason pressed the gas pedal and drove away without stopping. The past was a graveyard. He had no business digging through the ashes anymore. The letter arrived in an unmarked envelope, slipped through the mail slot late one evening. Jason recognized the handwriting immediately. He stood in the hallway, staring at it for a long time before finally tearing it open. The letter was short, rambling. full of messy sorrow. I am sorry. I never meant to hurt you like this. I lost everything because I was too weak, too selfish. Please find it in your heart to forgive me someday. Jason folded the paper carefully and set it on the kitchen counter. He did not burn it. He did not scream or cry. He simply stood there, breathing. Forgiveness was not a gift he could give her. Not now. Maybe not ever. But he could forgive himself. For trusting. For loving. For believing. And in that moment, Jason understood something that years of war and betrayal had not taught him. Sometimes, moving on does not mean forgetting. It means surviving. And choosing to live anyway. The auditorium buzzed with life, packed to the rafters with proud parents, flashing cameras, and the heavy scent of floral bouquets. Jason sat stiffly in the front row, his heart thudding against his ribs. On the stage, rows of young men and women in navy blue robes fidgeted, adjusted their caps, craned their necks to find their families in the crowd. Jason's eyes found Caleb immediately. Taller now, confident, his dark hair hidden under the cap, but that stubborn jawline. Jason's influence, maybe not by blood, but by years of love and sacrifice, was unmistakable. The principal began reading names. Each one called, each walk across the stage, was a victory for every broken road, every hard night, every choice that had led here. Jason's hands trembled as he clapped for each graduate, waiting, hard in his throat. Finally, Caleb Miller. The room thundered with applause, but for Jason, everything else fell away. Caleb crossed the stage with a broad, proud smile, diploma in hand, scanning the crowd until his eyes found Jason. Jason stood, clapping until his palms hurt. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the bloodlines. Not the betrayals. Not the ghosts. Only this. Only them. Father and son. Chosen. Fought for. Earned. And nothing could ever take that away. The ceremony ended in a flurry of photos, hugs, and promises to keep in touch. Jason and Caleb headed toward the parking lot, sunlight gleaming off the rows of polished cars. Jason paused, fishing his keys from his pocket, when he caught a flash of movement across the lot. Tyler. Older, heavier, his once proud swagger reduced to a bitter shuffle. His suit hung wrong on his frame, and his eyes, once full of cocky charm, were dulled by failure and regret. He was alone. No friends. No family. No legacy to be proud of. Tyler locked eyes with Jason from across the distance. For a moment, the world narrowed down to just them. The two soldiers who had once trusted each other with their lives, now strangers separated by betrayal. Tyler opened his mouth, as if to say something. Jason turned away without a word. Some battles did not need to be fought twice. Some enemies did not deserve a second glance. Jason squeezed Caleb's shoulder gently and walked toward their truck, the sun warm on their backs. The past could watch them leave. It had no power here anymore. Later that night, Jason sat on the porch of their small house, a beer sweating in his hand, the cicadas humming in the heavy summer air. Caleb was inside, laughing with a few friends over video games, his voice bright and free. Jason smiled faintly to himself. Victory did not feel like parades or fireworks. It felt like peace, like knowing you had made it through the fire without letting it hollow you out. Jason thought about all the nights he had nearly broken under the weight of betrayal. The nights he had stared at the ceiling, wondering if he had failed Caleb, failed himself. But tonight was proof he had not. He sipped his beer slowly, savoring the simple quiet. No speeches, no revenge plots, no chaos, just life, moving forward. Jason leaned back in his chair, letting the night wrap around him like a long-overdue blessing. He had survived, and now he was living. A week later, Jason sorted through a box of old papers in the garage, preparing for a long-overdue bonfire. Receipts, old army orders, medical forms, and at the bottom, a small envelope he had nearly forgotten. He opened it carefully. Inside was a photo. Him, Caleb, and Vanessa, taken on Caleb's first birthday. Jason stared at it for a long time. The smiles were real. Maybe the foundation had been false. Maybe the marriage had been a lie. But the moments with Caleb, the laughs, the bedtime stories, the backyard soccer games, those had been real. Jason slid the photo into his back pocket. He grabbed a handful of old documents, fed them to the fire pit, and watched as the flames roared to life. Some things deserved to burn, but not everything. He would keep the good. He would let go of the rest. Jason stood by the fire as the papers curled and blackened, a quiet smile on his lips. The past was over, and the future was his to build. Jason watched the sunset bleed across the Texas sky, the colors rich and violent, like the end of a battle. He stood on the porch of their new home, a modest little place surrounded by trees, where the air smelled like pine and freedom. Caleb leaned against the railing beside him, arms folded, a rare moment of quiet passing between them. "You ever think about what comes next?" Caleb asked, kicking at a loose board with his boot. Jason smiled slightly. Every day. He had spent so long fighting, first in deserts, then in courtrooms, then inside his own mind, that the idea of building something new still felt fragile. But it was real. It was happening. "You think we will be okay?" Caleb asked, his voice soft, unsure. Jason turned to him, resting a hand on his son's shoulder. "We already are," he said. "Maybe it is not the life we thought we would have, but sometimes the life you build from broken pieces is even stronger." Caleb nodded slowly, his eyes bright with something Jason recognized all too well: hope. It was not flashy. It was not dramatic. But it was theirs. And sometimes, the best victories were the quiet ones. Later that week, Jason and Caleb drove out to the old country road where Jason's grandfather's farm once stood. Just open fields now. Nothing left but wild flowers and the whisper of wind. Jason parked the truck and let Caleb run ahead, laughing into the open air. Jason followed at a slower pace, hands in his pockets, breathing deep. The ghosts of the past walked here too. Memories of a boy who had once believed in forever, of a man who had nearly lost everything, of a father who had chosen to fight for the only thing that mattered. He knelt by a cluster of bluebonnets, letting the earth stain his knees. "Thank you," he whispered, not to anyone in particular, but maybe to everyone who had come before him. Those who had fought, those who had fallen, those who had gotten back up anyway. Life was not perfect. It was messy, brutal, unfair. But it was also beautiful beyond words when you chose to keep living it with open hands and an open heart. Jason stood slowly, brushing dirt from his jeans. The echoes of betrayal, pain, loss, they would fade. But the memories they had built, the real ones, would stay. Jason and Caleb sat around a small fire that night, the stars spilling across the black sky like diamonds scattered by careless hands. Caleb poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks dancing into the air. "You know, Dad," he said, voice low, "I think everything that happened, it kind of made us stronger." Jason nodded, staring into the flames. "It did," he said quietly. "It broke us first. It hurt like hell. But we rebuilt ourselves the right way this time." Caleb grinned. "From the inside out." Jason chuckled, ruffling his hair. And in that moment, Jason thought about everything they had survived: betrayal, lies, heartbreak, and realized something simple, something powerful. Life does not guarantee fairness. People will fail you. Love will sometimes betray you. Trust will sometimes shatter. But what defines you is what you choose to do after. You can stay broken, or you can stand up, bleeding, bruised, and build something stronger than you ever imagined. Jason leaned back, watching the stars will overhead. Tomorrow would be another ordinary day. But tonight was extraordinary, because they had survived, because they had chosen to live, because they had turned pain into power. Before you go, tell me honestly, have you ever had to rebuild yourself after someone betrayed your trust? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your story in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Also, if you felt connected to Jason's journey, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon, not just for this story, but so we can meet again soon for another thrilling, emotional, epic revenge story. Until next time, take care of your heart, stay strong, and remember, sometimes the best kind of revenge is choosing to live your best life anyway. See you in the next unforgettable story.